Hello, I'm Christina Venning-Rose and welcome to this episode of Albinism Life. I had such fun recording this. My guest is Jenny Bovard. I came across Jenny because she is a podcast host for AMI Media in Canada. She has a podcast called Low Vision Moments and it's absolutely hysterical. It talks about all the bonkers things that people who are visually impaired do and try and get away with not doing, or just you need to go and listen to it. So I'll include a link. Jenny is such fun. She is really positive, but also she keeps it totally real as well. We talk about some situations that we've both been in terms of employment, pretending that we aren't visually impaired, and then the consequences that come with that as well. Talking about being in denial of having a visual impairment and having albinism, and what bearing albinism has had on both of us growing up. It was such fun to record. Jenny is an amazing guest, and I really hope she comes on another and we can talk about more crazy things together as well. I hope you enjoy and join me at the end of this episode.
I am Jenny Bovard and I am beyond delighted to be here on this podcast. I am located in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, and I grew up here on the East Coast, but I did study film and TV production in Toronto, Ontario. For about 4 years, got to host a podcast that I created called the Low Vision Moments Podcast. And that is a project all about, well, number one, raising awareness. Number two, making people laugh. We're trying to be funny and have a good time. And also just sharing really good stories that are relatable to people who live with albinism and visual impairment. I work with APSI, and they are the Atlantic Province's Special Education Authority. I get to work there as a mentor for children and youth who are blind and visually impaired all throughout the Atlantic provinces here in Canada. I also am connected with Blind Sports Nova Scotia. I play goalball, which is a really exciting team sport. And I get to play with our Nova Scotia women's team. I like to bake. I live with my husband and my dog, my 75-pound baby, and my kitty, whose name is Kitty.
There's a lot going on there, Jenny. So I came across you because I listened to your podcast, and let's get the fangirling out of the way. So the reason I've started this podcast is off the back of me coming on one of your podcasts, because I was just in awe of the fact that I found something that I could relate to, and something not only could I relate to that made me laugh, because a lot of your podcast, you talk about all the ridiculous and bonkers situations that we get into, like going into the men's toilets, pretending to pick up dog poo when you can't find it, all the random things that nobody who isn't part of our community would quite understand. I just think it's so important to have something out there that is for us, that we can relate to, because everyone else has got something, so why can't we? And I'm so excited to be chatting with you. I want to kind of rewind and take you back to being a child with albinism. Is there a point that you can remember when you realised that you were different to other kids?
Wow. I think I always felt different. There was no singular moment when I was like, light bulb, you are not like other kids. I think I always felt sort of othered and different. I remember being in a shopping mall with my grandmother. That was something that we did often together. We would go on little shopping trips. And I remember her reaction to other people in the shopping mall staring at me as a really small young child. I was not even school aged yet. So I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, 5 years old maybe. And I remember her getting so upset and verbally telling them where to go and what to do when they got there, because they were so blatantly looking at me. And whether they were looking at me because they thought my hair was beautiful or they wanted to know what was wrong with me, that didn't matter to my grandmother. She just thought speaking up and saying something was the best thing. And that, I think, that's certainly an early moment when I was like, I'm not like the other kids here in the ball pit. And is that the same kid that just passed me in the ball pit? I don't know. I always knew that there was something different about me. But that being said, we didn't really talk about albinism and we didn't really talk about disability in my house growing up.
So not talking about, because this is what I struggle with a bit. I had exactly the same. So in my household, I refer to albinism as the A word. We didn't talk about the A word. It was something that it was never said that it was wrong, because my parents did engage with the fact I had albinism, absolutely. But because we didn't talk about it, I felt there was something wrong with it. And there was something wrong with me, and there was something wrong with even acknowledging that I had albinism. And I think that had a huge impact on my kind of self-identity and sense of self as a child. Can you understand?
Yeah, I really resonate with that too. I don't know if it's a generational thing in terms of how we address disability and being different in the 90s when I grew up versus now. Every household is different, right? And I think it's easier and as an adult to look back and say, if we had done this differently, maybe I would have felt differently about myself. And so what I'm trying to say is I don't fault my parents or my family with how they did approach my albinism, because we didn't even use the word albinism. It just wasn't a thing. It just wasn't talked about. The approach was, she's just like the other kids. Let her try and do all the things like I have two older siblings. And so it was just like, well, she's going to do whatever they do unless she can't. But it wasn't really talked about. It was like, we got to slather on this sunscreen time and time again, but there was no conversation about why, who, what, why, when, where, how. And then I think that perpetuates the negativity of the word albino and albinism. When someone shouts it at you from a vehicle or from across the playground, it's like that extra sting, because you're like, ooh, that's a foreign word. That doesn't sound like a nice thing. It's an othering type of word, when it really is just a describer of who we are. I used to be really keen on only using the word albino as an adjective, and I'm leaning further and further away from that as I get older. I start online, sometimes I post videos and I'm like, hey, it's Jenny, I'm your favorite albino, even though I'm not. You don't need to tell me if I'm not. That's fine. Don't leave a comment. But it's like, just taking the word back has been for me in the last 10 years or so. I'm like, you know what? Let me lean into this word and own it and take the power back, because for so many years, it either wasn't talked about or it wasn't used in a nice way toward me. And that certainly affected my identity. Like, I didn't even acknowledge I had a disability or albinism until my adult life.
Like my parents did the best they could. I grew up in the 80s. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have the information. I mean, they knew what albinism was, and they knew all the medical stuff and all of that. And I don't think in the 90s either, kind of the social and emotional impact. Mental health wasn't even really talked about massively, was it? So if it's not talked about, then you don't really understand what the impact of all of it is. So I was exactly like you. I denied that I had a disability until I was in my late teens and I went to university, and I realized I had to, because I was ignoring every single person I walked past, and people were like, why didn't you speak to her? And I realized that my inability to see was having an impact on other people and how I made relationships with people too. And I was like, I have to do something about this,
And I think it does really depend at what time in history you come of age, because we knew about bullying in the 90s. We knew it was bad. Everyone knew that, Jenny, people call her names. But like you said, there was not a real understanding of how that would affect someone long term, or even in the moment, right? How you feel about yourself as you move through the world, how other people treat you, that has a big impact. I think I have a unique experience in that I don't think a lot of people can say they've had a frozen orange thrown at their face on two completely different occasions, just because you don't fit a certain mold. And that really affected how I perceive myself, like my self-worth. And then I think it was mid 90s, late 90s, the Life magazine spread from Rick Gattati.
Yeah.
And it presented all these women and these people with albinism, and they were painted in a more positive and beautiful, like appealing light than I had ever seen or heard of in my life. And I was like, wait a minute, these people are freaking gorgeous. And you read their little bios and you're like, these people are living full, wonderful, enjoyable lives. Like that's possible. That was a big moment for me where I was like, wait a minute, maybe I'm not totally hideous, because it wasn't the same as it is now. And now I'm part of all these albinism groups and low vision groups, and we have influencers. So I think it's different now. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's certainly different, right? There's people out there that look like us for the kids who are coming up now. As a mentor in my day job, kids are still dealing with trying to hide their disability and not acknowledging it.
Do you know what? Even as an adult, Jenny, I think I'm still guilty of it myself in certain situations. I have no idea why will not admit to some people that I'm visually impaired. Like, it's only in transient interactions with people. So it will be somebody in a shop or something like that, and I can't read something. I will not say, I'm visually impaired, I can't read that, could you help me? I will just look like a weirdo, or I'll be rude, or I will do something. But there's a block sometimes with me where I go back to my 15-year-old self, where I just am totally in denial about the whole thing.
Maybe it's not denial. I think there's a certain level of self-determination, or, you're trying to use the tools and techniques that you've got on you, on your person, right? Let's use the vision that we've got to the point that it doesn't work anymore, or the magnification or the tech on my phone. But then when we get to a point where it's like, oh, I still can't see the price tag, or I still can't see the menu. I really need a hand here. I don't have this menu memorized yet. I don't know what fancy coffee I want. There comes a point when you've got to be like, okay, well, I just need to be open about it now and ask for help. But like you, there are certain scenarios where I still try to fly under the radar and just pray and hope that no one notices. And I'll give a specific example. Hopefully none of my clients are going to listen to this. So I signed up for a service where I can go and dog sit and house sit, and I can care for people's pets. I removed my low vision checkered eye button from my backpack, from my hat, the things I normally wear to let the world around me know that, hey, I'm visually impaired, and that's why I tripped on the curb. I'm not drunk today. And because I didn't want them to know. And it's not a traditional employment situation where I felt comfortable disclosing that. I didn't want them to know. So far, I've flown under the radar. But it might come up, Christina, that I have to be like, oh, you got me.
It's because you don't want to be judged, because people have a perception of what being visually impaired is, or what having albinism is. And they might turn around and go, Jenny, I don't want you looking after my dog. You can't even see. Like, how can you look after a dog? So I could potentially be doing exactly the same. But it's really hard, isn't it? Because it's not, you probably inside, you don't really want to be doing that, but you sort of kind of feel you have to.
There's an ick, right? There's a level of ick where like, ugh, I'm not being true to myself. I'm doing the community a disservice. I try not to be too hard on myself about it, because we have to be flexible to the environment, to the situation. Society, they just haven't caught up to us yet. So passing the Low Vision Moments podcast baton onto the people like you who are going to continue having these conversations and making them available to the public. The more we can demystify blindness and albinism, because even you and I, we both have albinism. How we deal with the exact same scenario, what tools we use, what techniques we use could differ completely. And our limitations, for whatever reason, may differ completely. You might not be comfortable house sitting for a complete stranger. I've got the audacity to show up at a stranger's house, let them give me a tour, not see the big Post-it note with the Wi-Fi information on it, and be like, hey, may I have your Wi-Fi information? I think we need to be fluid, and we need to be kind with ourselves while we're still educating society and bringing them along to understand that they don't get to choose our limitations. That's up to us.
Yeah.
And we'll tell you if we can't do it.
Exactly. Well, for the most part, we'll tell you we should. I remember when I was a lot younger and I was kind of starting out, I thought, oh, I could be a nanny. It'd be great if I love kids. I'd be a nanny. But I cannot tell anybody that I'm visually impaired, because if I tell them I'm visually impaired, then they won't want me to nanny. So we won't be talking about that. And I was like, I don't want them to see my eyes. I don't want them to see the color of my eyes, because they'll think, why has she got purple eyes? So I put my contact lens. I had like tinted brown contact lenses. I put those in. Didn't dye my hair, so my eyebrows and my eyelashes. Probably was quite obvious to them that I had albinism, if they knew what that was. I went on an agency and I signed up, and this family got in touch and said, do you want to come down to us, stay overnight and do a trial, and we'll see how we all get on? And it was absolutely scared to death. I'm like, nope, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a nanny. Turned up at their house, walked in their front door, tried to be like the most sighted person in the world, and literally within 5 minutes had fallen down like 5 steps and walked into the doors that go into the back garden, because I didn't realize that they were shut. And I left about 3 hours later, because I was just like, I don't think this is going to work out. I left. I pretended I got a call from my mum. I said I had to go home, but I still couldn't have the courage to tell them that I was visually impaired. I don't know what they thought of me, but I just didn't have the ability to say, I've done these things, not because I'm stupid, not because I'm anything, I just can't see.
Did they have any kind of reaction when you had a trip down the stairs or walked into the door?
They just stared at me. They just looked at me like, how could you not have seen those stairs? How could you not have seen the glass in the door? Obviously inside I was dying, so probably was giving off I'm dying vibes, don't talk to me. But, I wasn't, if I would have been honest, I could have pulled it off. I could have said, oh goodness, I'm visually impaired. Sorry, I didn't see those stairs. Sorry, I didn't see the glass. And that probably would have given them more confidence in me as a person. But they probably thought I was off my face on drugs or something. I don't know. Hence, my nannying career started and stopped within 1 day. That was it, no more.
That's similar to my career in housekeeping. I did a really similar thing. I showed up and I wanted to get into the hospitality industry, and I thought, ooh, housekeeping's a good place to start. It's decent money. And I realized, no, I'm never going to be able to tell if there's a hair here, if there's a hair there. I can't keep up with this particular hotel's standard anyway. But again, I just glossed over it. There was no discussion. I just made an excuse, and I just never revisited it again. And think for the two of us and for anyone who has a disability, I think something that is really empowering is like, that you could be a nanny, that you're capable. So highlight what your skills are, highlight what your achievements are, and remind yourself of that, and remind your potential employer of that. It's sad, but we have to sort of sell ourselves, and we have to sort of overcompensate, not only I think for ourselves sometimes, to like pump ourselves up and be like, you can do this thing. There might be adaptations. There might be certain parts of the job that will have to either be done by someone else or done a certain way. But I think if we focus on what we can do, the visual impairment thing can be a side conversation. It should be. It's all about perception of limitations. You're only, I'm not going to be an airline pilot unless AI gets really, really good. Probably not in my lifetime. I'm still waiting on my self-driving car. I'm just hoping that'll come in my lifetime. And then I can be a taxi driver for a day. There are some real limitations. And I think if we explore what we can and can't do, and just highlight what your real skills are.
Everyone's at different points in their journey, and it's about the more confidence you've got in your abilities, the more confident vibes you're getting across to other people. But I think you've got to be honest with yourself as well. Like you do yourself a disservice if you set out to do something that you know that you're really going to struggle with. Don't put yourself through it. Just don't do it, because it's not going to help that self-esteem, is it? It's really not.
Yeah, you're right. And I think I harmed my own self-esteem in hobbies and in work, but particularly in finding recreation and hobbies. I really struggled with that growing up because my siblings were in air cadets. So air cadets is, your plan is to go and work in the Air Force and be a pilot. Jenny wasn't going do that. And then, it was gymnastics and the dance classes. And I don't know if we didn't know how to accommodate me and make those activities more accessible, or if maybe it was that and a combination of me refusing to accept any sort of adaptations or combinations or even talk about albinism. But I remember being in a dance class and all the other girls in my brownies group were in ballet and in dance, and they were so graceful, and they all had this little lovely friend group that I just I wanted to break into it. I wanted to, do something fun and maybe excel at something. And and I just failed miserably at all those things. And I think a lot of it came down to I wasn't really open to exploring different ways of doing it. Yes, there are real limitations, but keep trying things and trying. I would encourage people to keep trying things until you find what sticks, because it took me so long to find the hobbies that I enjoy. I didn't feel like I was participating fully in a lot of things I tried. Other people can be discouraging too.
Did you know what you wanted to do, or did you stop yourself from doing certain things because you thought that you couldn't do them?
When I got out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I knew what my interests were, but I didn't have a career path. And I don't blame anyone else for that. I think people really tried to sort of guide me and give me resources, and I kind of pushed back against those. I thought I was just going to go out into the world and I just wanted to work and pay my bills and live life. And so I tried a bunch of different jobs. I tried being a cashier at a grocery store.
Did that work for you?
It didn't work.
Curious.
No, it didn't work. Cash registers are. I did work as a barista for a while. I loved it. I had those recipes memorized before anybody else. Everyone else was still, that did training at the same time as me. They were still referring to the book, and I had them all memorized because you have to memorize a lot of things when you're blind or visually impaired, right? And then as well with the till, with the cash register, there were only so many tiles on the screen that you could touch as a barista, and they were different colors. So just like on my smartphone, just like on my remote for my TV, I just know where the buttons are. I just figured it out. And sort of through memorization. But I tried a bunch of different jobs on for size. And after a year or so out of high school, I decided I'd always been interested in media and storytelling and film and TV. I've always been a big film and TV buff. And I really didn't know how that could fit into a career. And genius visually impaired woman decided to go to film and TV production school. And there are certain jobs that I knew that I wouldn't be able to do on set. I'm not handling $50,000 lens. I'm not going to be the person touching that equipment. Let me be on the planning and organization side. So I went to film and TV school. I got a diploma there. And then after that, I did have some people kind of discourage me during that process where they're like, you should pick another career because you just tripped over that wire, blah, blah, blah. I had a, real slap in the face by reality, because at the time there weren't people with disabilities working behind the scenes in the film and TV industry. And if there were very few and far between, and they weren't talking about it. And so I found myself trying to do jobs in entry-level roles in the film industry where you should really be able to drive, you should really be able to go inside, outside without lots of time for your eyes to adjust. And I was doing embarrassing things like spilling pop can, big flats of pop all over the place, and trying to clean it up before anybody showed up. And I didn't get it cleaned up well enough, so everyone's feet are sticking to the floor the whole day and making a terrible sticky noise every time they lift their shoes. I tried to work in that industry, sort of entry level, work your way up type thing after that. And I was like, I can't do this. This is not for a visually impaired person. And if it is, I'm going to have to tell people about it. And I'm not ready to do that. So I went and worked office admin, and I actually really enjoy that work. I offered to volunteer at AMI, and they said, well, why don't you come and audition for this on-camera role? And I was like, on camera? I don't want to be on camera. I want to be behind the camera. I want to be the puppeteer telling people what to do. I'm in charge. I'm not in front of the camera. But then 10 plus years later, I still get to work with AMI, Accessible Media. They're a national broadcaster in Canada here.
It was really interesting because I worked in TV as well. And I was open about my visual impairment because I had a guide dog at the time. And I realized that I wasn't going to get anywhere because people really struggled with the concept of a visually impaired person working in a visual medium. They just couldn't. So I was on the production side of things, and yet they couldn't, like, an assistant producer, and they couldn't get their head around it. And I was trying to explain that TV is about storytelling, it's about narratives, and I can't self-shoot. I can't hold a camera and film something because it will be all over the place, and it probably won't be the thing that we want to be seeing. It'll be something random. It's not, it'll be on the side, it'll be this, it just won't happen. I can't do that.
I tried. I don't want to interrupt you, but I tried that once. I was like, okay, I'll stand behind the camera. And the white balance was like the white balance wasn't set. Something got pressed and it was trying to white balance the whole time. So the footage completely not usable. I was like, okay, that's not going to be my role.
No.
But that's really frustrating for you because you were already in that position and you're still trying to convince everyone that you're capable.
And I couldn't. And I went for jobs, and people openly discriminated against me. They openly said to me, you can't do this role. You can't do that role because, I don't. The whole health and safety thing came up lots of times. You won't be safe. How can you do that role because you can't see properly? How can you direct people? You can't work with celebrities because who you are. So many instances of it. And I was younger, and I just let it go because I just accepted it, because when you're younger, you do. But I realized that it wasn't helping me. It wasn't helping my confidence and my self-esteem to keep getting knocked back and knocked back and knocked back. And there are visually impaired people that do work in TV. I think that sometimes I don't go around thinking I've got albinism and I look different to other people, because if I did that, I would probably never step out of the house. I would probably not have any confidence. I would not do the things I do. But the reality, I think, for us is that people do look at us and they do judge us straight away because we don't look the same. The TV industry is very image focused, and if you don't fit that model, then you can potentially struggle.
And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I hope that there is a shift happening, though. I hope that this push toward inclusion and equity that everyone is talking about in every industry, I hope it's not just performative. Do you know what I mean? Because we're seeing more characters that happen to have a disability. I'm not seeing it necessarily in the news industry. And it's so interesting that you talk about other people putting limitations on you, because for the longest time, I assumed I could never use a prompter until we had that International Albinism Awareness Day special for the Low Vision Moments podcast. And you came on and made a huge impression on me. And so did all the other guests. Until that point, literally 15 minutes before we went live. And so one of the producers says, well, why don't you try putting it up on the huge monitor that we have over here? And I was like, I don't think I've ever seen a monitor that big. Let's give it a try, see how big we can make it. And lo and behold, it worked perfectly. And I was like, what? All this time, I didn't even know this was an option. I just assumed this wasn't for me.
How far away was it, the monitor?
It was like, I'm not good with distances, but it was, well off camera. So I had the iPad in my hands and I was controlling the scrolling and the zooming with my hands, but looking straight ahead at the prompter. So now I'm like, maybe my news anchor career can really can happen. But all that to say is like, I hope it's not performative, because those people in that space for that special, as an example, there were a bunch of people who did not work for AMI in there. And they're just a bunch of random people from the industry that we were able to hire. They were there for a specific job, and that was to light me in a way that didn't kill me for 2 hours and give me a terrible headache after. I just hope that there is really a shift happening, because the people coming up after us, they deserve better than being told you can't do this. And you deserve to have enough confidence and understanding of your skills and abilities to not believe them when they put limitations on you.
Absolutely. We were just talking before we started to record about being on camera. And I was saying to you that It's not until I started filming these podcasts that I realized how blind I look when I'm on camera, because I can't, because of my nystagmus, I can't stare at a fixed point, because otherwise my eyes will just wobble all over the place and I will feel sick. So I look all over the place, and if I look down, I kind of like, my face is in something to read my notes. I had no idea I looked like this. And you said that you had an epiphany moment too.
Well, we think we're flying under the radar so well, right? We think we're blending in. Shock. No, we're not. Not all the time anyway, right? And yeah, like you, this only came in my adult life. Like, I wish people would have told me in a gentle way that I was squinting all the time, particularly outside. I was really reluctant to wear sunglasses, prescription sunglasses. I always thought they looked terrible on me, and they didn't really block the light from the top and the sides. So I would be, when I first started on camera doing broadcast presenter type roles for TV, and I was on camera and I would watch the stories back, and I was like, oh my God, really? I'm squinting that much? Like, my face doesn't even look like my face. It's so scrunched up. Like, no wonder people are looking at me like I have a problem, because I look like I have a problem. And so from that point on, I really embraced the sunglasses. And, you won't find me outside without sunglasses ever. And at that point as well, I started speaking up and saying, hey, like when we were doing sort of in studio or on camera stuff, when they wanted to put lights on me, I'd be like, wait a minute, we got to figure out this lighting thing. And until then, I didn't even know that I looked. And there's another time, I don't know when exactly it was, but I realized that I have nystagmus, so my eyes move involuntarily as well. But I have a bit of a null point where if I turn my head to the side, they're a little bit more stable, my eyes. They don't move around as much. And so I realized people think I'm giving them the side eye. Like, they think I'm looking at them sideways, and that's not a friendly look, I realized. So I'm very conscious of that now. And I still do the side eye thing. You don't always have an opportunity to explain yourself. And that's, again, full circle back to why we need to keep having these conversations and putting them in the public space, because the person on the train might have, their initial thought might be, why are her eyes doing that? Why is she looking at me like that? But their second thought might be, oh, wait, I heard a conversation about albinism or blindness. Maybe they have a visual impairment and they're not looking at me with a stink eye. That's my hope with having these conversations.
Absolutely. And maybe if anybody sees Jenny or me out in public, because I do the same as you, if we're doing this, no side eyes, I probably don't even know you're there. I probably haven't even seen you. I haven't acknowledged you. I'm not looking at you. I'm just doing my thing to stop my eyes from being all over the place.
And sometimes, I don't know if people think this. I haven't had someone come up to me and say, why are you staring at me? But sometimes I'll be in public and I'm waiting for someone or waiting for a bus, and I think I'm just staring off into the distance. I don't know what I'm looking at. There's like a brightly colored thing over there, maybe, that caught my attention, and I'm just looking over there. And then I realize there's movement, and it's like the figure of a person. Like, oh no, I've been staring at this person for God knows how long now. So we're not staring at you, probably, and we're not giving you the side eye. And I'm probably not drunk if I trip on the curb. Probably.
Somebody really recently came up to me and told me to stop staring at them and stop looking at me like them, and told me that I was on drugs because my eyes were moving, and really took me aback, because, like you were saying, I wasn't looking at anybody. I probably saw something that was brightly coloured, and I'm thinking, what is that? But me trying to figure out is me really staring to see it. They thought I was looking at them and got really offended, and I had no idea. But I'm also not on drugs either. I don't do drugs. The eyes, they just do their own thing.
Are you at a point in your life where you have those interactions, you don't really get the opportunity to explain yourself, or you're not in the mood? Because that's not your problem. If you're not in the mood to explain yourself, are you at a point in your life where you can brush that off pretty easily, or will that affect your day, or does it depend on the day?
Depends on the day, and quite often I'm really good not acknowledging it, not thinking about it, not saying anything, and then I'll be lying in bed with my husband at like midnight, and I'll go like 4 days later, oh, this thing happened to me at football the other day, and then it all comes out. and then we talk about it, and he'll say, well, that's an absolute idiot, you know, blah 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 blah. We'll talk about it, and then generally I'm okay and I move on. But I have like a delayed reaction usually to it. What about you?
I think until up until the last 10-15 years, where I've become more open and accepting of my albinism and my disability, it would have really affected me, and it would have made me feel really terrible, and it would have made me feel like everyone is always looking at me all the time. And that's not true. Sure, they're probably looking at me, admiring my hair, but it would have probably sent me in a really negative direction. I don't know where the shift came. I think it probably came from working with AMI, working with CNIB as well, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, and also getting involved with Blind Sports Nova Scotia, and just being around other people who are really peers and who get it. And it makes you realize you are not that special and you're not that strange. Yes, we're rare, but you know, it's really a them thing. So the person who came up to you and was like, why are you looking at me? Why are you staring at me?
Tell me what you would have done, because I get into these situations, and as a female, I live in London, and you know, like, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but people they're not supposed to, obviously, but people carry knives. You don't know what people's intentions are, and as a female who's visually impaired, who looks different, you could stalk me all you like, and I would have absolutely no clue. You could follow me back down to my street, and then you could put a knife in me because I've challenged you. So I tend not to challenge people for that reason. The other day I was on the underground, and I was stood up because it was busy. And when I go into the city, I use my long cane because I find it easier. And I was, obviously, when you use a long cane, people just think you are blind. They think you can't see, because a lot of people don't understand it. So I'm stood there trying to, you know, like, with a long cane, it can be like your posture and your stance can be really awkward. I don't like standing there holding it like it's propping me up. I try to stand there and kind of look a bit cool somehow. So I'm standing there trying to look cool. And this girl is, I want to say, about 4 footsteps in front of me. She's holding onto a pole because the train's moving. Then she gets her phone out of her bag. You know, you can tell when someone is taking a picture of you, just the way she was holding her phone. She got her phone out, and then she stopped holding on, and then she held it up right in front of me and took a picture. And I wasn't 100% sure, and I didn't know what to do. The train cleared out. She sat down, and she sat down on the chair next to where I was stood. She's holding her phone. My vision isn't good enough to see her screen, but I can see the colours, and the colours were my colours, and I knew she had taken a picture of me because she thought I couldn't see her. And I feel like if she had good intentions, like, so say she had a friend with albinism or a relative, she would have said to me, oh my gosh, I know someone with albinism, can I take a picture of you and show it to them? So I'm having to assume she had ill intentions taking that picture, but I did not know what to do in that situation. What would you have done?
That's really interesting, because I've had that happen on a public transit bus, and I was sure that this guy had taken my picture. That was at that point in my life, I just like crumpled inside myself and became very uncomfortable. And it just made me feel icky and bad for, I don't know how long, probably several days. It stuck with me. It's, again, like, you're going about your day, you're just trying to live your life, and then boom, here's someone making you feel like a pile of crap just for looking different. And that's really creepy behavior. Just let's point out, don't take anybody's picture without their permission. I don't care if I look different. That doesn't give you permission to take my photo. Creepy. So I didn't say anything then, but now I feel like I'm a different person. Mm-hmm. And again, it depends on the day. And you made a really good point about personal safety. I often joke, and I shouldn't joke, but I often joke that I should get into more fights than I don't get into fights, maybe because I'm intimidating when I do speak up, but I run my mouth probably when I shouldn't. And I speak up and I say things maybe when I am putting myself in harm's way. But if that happened to me today, would probably approach it with humor to start, and see where it goes. I would probably say something cheeky like, hey, that's going to be $50 if you want to take my photo. Let me give you my email so you can email money, transfer me the royalties, or delete the photo now, because that's creepy and you don't have permission to have my photo. Another thing that happened to me, I was at a concert and it was one of my first times using my mobility cane. And it was like, I have peripheral vision. It's like I can see the floor down below me. Like there's stairs and there are slopes that I didn't know were there. And anyway, so I was in the washroom, and very busy washroom, concert, intermission vibes. And I'm waiting to wash my hands and I have my cane with me and I have glasses. So like, I don't know what's going through this woman's head. Like I've got prescription glasses on and a cane. So that's confusing to a lot of people. Haha, that's your problem. Let's talk about it if you want. But she stepped over my cane to cut in front of me in line to wash her hands. And I was in shock that I didn't really come up with anything to say. I just kind of waited for her to have her turn. And then I strategically moved my cane very quickly, so it kind of maybe hit her in the foot a little bit. And that was satisfying enough for me. But it was a crowded space. It could have been an accident. But I was like, you know what? That wasn't cool. Let me give you a little whack here just to make myself feel better. There was no education or message there. It was just annoyed.
I've done that before. When it's rush hour, and if you're using a cane in London, people will literally not be looking where they're going. And they will literally trip over my cane, or they will just walk into it, or I've had it where it's fallen out of my hand before. And I am not ashamed to say, I will absolutely, if you pee me off with that cane, I will have your ankles. I will have you out. What I do is because people, if you're stupid to think that anyone that uses a cane has no vision, then I will treat you with that contempt. So I just make that assumption that they think I can't see, and I will just literally bulldoze through the whole of the crowd.
Because it's kind of satisfying. And I said a moment ago, there's no education there, but maybe there is. Maybe a swift little bruise to the ankle will make them think twice about stepping over someone's cane or ignoring their cane. Do you know?
People just make all sorts of assumptions, don't they, when they see something like a long cane and quite a lot of times, if you have a cane or a guide dog and you'll say on your mobile phone, again, absolutely freaks people out. They're like, but she can see. Hallelujah, praise the Lord. How can she see? And then you have people stare at you, and on the underground particularly, it's a really close space between, like, you're sitting opposite people and I can see them when we're that close, and I can't see their eyes, but I can see them staring at me, and I'll be on my phone doing my thing with it like up here, and I don't care. I've got no shame. That's how I use the phone, and if it entertains you, then so be it. But if you're going to stare at me the whole time on my phone, I will acknowledge that. So when I get up and it's my stop, I might accidentally do a little gesture to them. I might gesture to them and then walk off.
I don't see any problem with that at all. And I think it's so important that we don't internalize the not blind enough to do this or too blind to do that. Because I have an Apple Watch, for example, now. Life-changing. Game changer. I've never been able to glance down at my wrist and get the time. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And I realized just recently, I'm almost 40 years old and talking watches have been around for a very long time. I just realized I was walking somewhere and I glanced down at my watch and I was like, you know what? You could have been getting the time just as easy with a talking watch if you had just accepted that you're blind enough for a talking watch, or you're blind enough to use a mobility cane when you need it. There's such thing as a part-time cane user. It's okay to just have your cane in your backpack and take it out when you need it. You're not faking anything. It doesn't matter if other people are questioning whether you need it or not. Use it if you need it, and be a part-time cane user if you need to do that. That's something for me that I'm still dealing with, because on the one hand, I go and do this dog sitting, house sitting stuff, and I'm flying under the radar so far. We'll see how that goes. I'll report back. But other times I go to a crowded space or an unfamiliar space and I've got the cane out, and it might be confusing to people, but that's a them thing, If you want to have a good conversation, we'll have a real conversation.
Yeah.
Or you can have a couple little love taps on the ankles, one or the other.
That's a really hard thing. It's only in the last year that I've started to embrace using a cane when I feel like I need it, because I do struggle with, and I can rationalize it, and I know I should do what's right for me and it's other people's problems, but I in my head have loads of rules about when and where I can use my cane. So for instance, I'll walk about 10 minutes from my house. No, 5. No, there's a bus stop that I go to, which is probably like a 6-minute walk. At that point, that's kind of the radius where I can start using my cane. I cannot use my cane before that, just in case my neighbours see me. But, oh, Christina, your neighbours will be driving past in the car because you're walking down the road from your house. But in my head, the closeness is too close. So the distance from my house makes it okay to use that cane.
But what's the negative thing that will happen if they see you with your cane?
Jenny, that's the $1 million question. What is that? What is it? Because I've not worked it out yet.
And I don't ask you that to make you feel bad about it. I ask you that because I want to know for myself, because I'm out here confusing my neighbors all the time. I've lived in this house, I don't know, close to 10 years, and I run. You know what's funny is I'm in this low vision group online, and they described how they bike so well. I ride a tandem bike in some cases, and I ride a standard bike in some cases. And they described it so well. They were like, I don't bike any faster than I can see. And I'm like, that's it. That makes all the sense in the world. And similar for me, I run around my neighborhood, but it's the same route all the time for 10 years. I walked it a million times before I ran it. So I know where all the curbs are. I know the flow of traffic. I know the stop signs. I know they put a new traffic light over here, yada, yada. I know where everything is. So they see me several times a week running around this neighborhood. I do have the big fit over sunglasses, so they might know something's up. I'm blocking out all the sun. But again, I don't really need my cane in my neighborhood. But if they see me using my cane, then I'm like, well, they're going to think I'm faking it or I'm doing something untoward. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're just my neighbors, and some of them I'm closer to than others. But it's not like we sit down and have these conversations about how my vision works and what I can see and what I can't see, and depending on the light and all of that. So I only ask because I'm not asking for a friend. I'm asking for myself.
It's just crazy though, because I can't explain it, and it's all the things that you've just said, and I don't know what they think. I'm some kind of scammer, or do you know what, Jenny? They probably don't even care though, do they?
They probably don't even notice.
No, they probably don't. They probably just see, oh, Christina, look, there she is on the street, and I won't wave at her because she never waves back, so that's it. They probably don't see the cane, nothing.
That's right. And that's it. It's this mostly internalized stuff that we're putting out there, right? It's an us and it's a them thing sometimes. So yeah, and it's so silly when you talk about it, right? Just do what works for you, right?
Yeah.
We're always evolving, and I have to be patient with myself, because again, there's some cases, like I was at a family event with a bunch of people, like family friends who are just acquaintances, and I should have had my cane. There was a bonfire. When there's a bonfire and all you can see is the damn bonfire.
Nothing.
And you're like, who's that over there? I don't know. It's just
black.
It's just fire and black. Yeah. So I should have had my cane. But internally, I was like, I don't want to have all these conversations or potential conversations to explain myself. And that was so stupid. It wasn't a thing. That was just me.
If you could give advice to a young person right now with albinism who's having a really hard time, what would you say to them?
If I can give advice to someone with albinism who's having a rough time accepting themselves, accepting their albinism, I would say it's going to get easier only if you put yourself outside of your comfort zone and keep trying. There's no point in giving up on yourself or giving up on enjoying life. I place a lot of importance on finding activities and finding people who bring you enjoyment in life. And if you focus on those things, and if you focus on what you are able to do and not what society and what real limitations keep you from doing, then you're going to find more happiness and more enjoyment in life. And there are going to be difficult days. Not a day goes by that I don't wish I could hop in my car and drive myself somewhere, or maybe live outside of the city in a place where I don't need to have access to public transit, rely on public transit. It's such a big production. It's such extra work to have albinism and live with albinism. It's going to get better. There are crappy people out there, but there are a lot of really good people out there. So if you find them and you embrace them and even invite the crappy people in, they might surprise you because they might just not know what they don't know about you or about albinism. So just try and stay open to other people and yourself and just the world. Embrace all those things and embrace yourself.
And I always think what really helped me was to find my people, to find my community, and to be part of my community. Now, that's not what everybody wants to do. You can just even do it from the periphery, can't you? Just kind of understand that you're not alone and there are people out there. Because I think that can also have a massive impact on the acceptance you have of your situation.
I think even just joining some online groups, I think that's really where it started for me, is joining online Facebook groups about albinism and low vision. And you realize you're not alone, because it can feel really isolating sometimes. Nobody in my family, probably nobody in my hometown that I know of, has albinism. So it can feel like you're the only one. But you're not.
Thank you so much for listening to that edition of Albinism Life with Jenny and me. It was such fun to record. Jenny's an amazing person. So I'm hoping I'm gonna nab her and get her onto another episode of my podcast so we can talk about more stuff. If you want to get in touch, please email info@albinism.org.uk. I'll see you soon. Bye.